Okay, folks, welcome to another lightning session. We're talking today about how data leaders build authentic executive presence. So today is very much a lot more about you as a human and how you come across, regardless of the message that you're sharing. And so we'll go pretty quickly today. There's not too much content. A lot of it is just to give you some ideas as to how to kind of start to execute that. So again, about me, for those of you that are here for the first time, I'm originally Canadian who is now living in Germany. I've been here for 4 years. I grew up in Australia, moved back to Canada, and now now I'm in Germany. I've been in data analytics for over 18 years. Right now, I'm the VP of Data and Analytics at Zeal Network, which is a German lottery provider. But I've got a ton of experience across e-commerce, fintech, prop tech, wealth management, and gaming in my career. I'm also an IECL executive certified coach, and this is where my passion lies. I love giving back and coaching people. And obviously, some of these sessions are more me teaching, but coaching is something that I'm very passionate about. So that's who I am, and I'm glad that you're here with me today to go down this path, and hopefully I can give you some information that helps you. And so the focus today is kind of really three things. I want us or you to speak like a leader. So part of it we'll talk about is adapting your message for senior audiences. At the end of the day, most of the time, the problem hasn't been what you're trying to tell them, it's how you tell them. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to kind of shift from these detailed explanations that make you seem more junior to something that's a little bit more senior, and so to drive that impact. We'll talk about executive presence at the project level. So a couple practical ways or a framework that I use that make you sound and appear more senior, some phrasing, some posturing, some toning. And then ideally, you'll be able to choose something that's coming up real soon and use it tomorrow. Really, at the end of the day, that's what I want it to be. So you'll find out how to use that and do that right away and hopefully see some benefits. I always like to start with a story. I think we've all been there. We've been in a meeting before, we do our presentations, you come out of it, and someone says, whether it's your boss or a friend or someone who's confident enough to give you feedback, you were stuck in the weeds. And at the end of the day, you spent days preparing, you checked your analysis, you checked your numbers, but between all that, you just didn't communicate properly. You sounded junior, right? And we'll go through a couple of examples in a minute, but you've now been typecast as that junior person, the person who comes in and talks to you about process and how you built it. And in reality, what you want it to be is be that senior leader, right? That's that step that we want to make. And then when they say you're too in the weeds, you're not tactical enough, or too tactical, you're not strategic enough, they're really not talking about your work. They're really talking about how you frame the work that you're doing. Because at the end of the day, that analysis that you did in data, or that model that you built, or that table that you created is creating business value. It's all about how you frame that in a way. And so we're going to talk a little bit about today about how in senior conversations, that perception of confidence and that clarity is actually more important to your credibility than the actual work that you do. We're going to talk a little bit about how it's not about how you perform in the role, though that's a part of it. It's really the ability to kind of show that calm conviction and tie that relevance and the control in your message when you speak to them. And we'll unpack all that today. All right. We'll go through that a little bit and give you some examples as to words and structure and tone. So again, I want to reiterate, a lot of the times being too in the weeds, too junior, too not ready, not strategic enough has nothing to do with the work that you do. It's all about how you message it. And that's what we'll talk about. And so decisions often move fast, and especially if you get a chance to work directly with VPs or C-level executives, and depending on the level of the company that you're at, they listen for impact, trade-offs, and direction. They don't really care about how you did it, what you did, how you got to the number. Some do, don't get me wrong, some do, but they'll ask for that. They also look to see how confident you are. And so if you sound hesitant or technical, they assume that you're just not ready to think about the bigger picture. And then finally, as well, confidence and clarity isn't just about you creating that ego. It's not about, oh, if I'm confident in a meeting or if I'm too clear in a meeting, they'll think that I have an ego. It's actually about giving people that they trust what you're sharing with them. And as we all know, people that are quite confident often get away with things that are often untrue. And so We're used to that in our jobs as data people. We see through that often, but part of that is that perception is the reality. And so the way that you communicate becomes that credibility signal that we're looking for. And so we're not fixing this by changing what you say, but really about how you say, right? And that's our big focus today. So let's get into the real details of it. So smart data leaders lose influence because we often lead with process. I talked last week about storytelling, and if you haven't seen that session, maybe have a look at it. But this idea that we are taught the wrong way to tell stories. We often start with, what did I do? Well, I had this problem, and then I looked at this table, and then I joined them together, and then I did this analysis, but I didn't really like it, so I went back. Well, you didn't really lead with that purpose, all right? So we're explaining all the work that we've done before we even explain what we're trying to solve or what that impact is, right? So right away, we lead with process. And that's just the way we were taught from primary school into high school. Show your work, explain to me how you got to here. But in the business world, no one really cares about that, right? And that makes you sound junior. So we want to, if I flip over to the point one on the success side, we want to lead with impact, right? We want to start off with, this analysis has allowed us to figure out how we can make an extra $2 million in revenue. Then if they really want to know how'd you get to that, they'll ask you. They'll come back and say, tell me how you got there. Tell me about your process. What did you do to get to this number? Many of them won't. But if you start off by explaining the mechanics, you've lost them. Two, sounding uncertain when you're being accurate, right? We often want to hedge. We don't want to be too egotistical. We'll start with, that depends on this context or that context. Or, I mean, we could potentially get a different number if, okay, well, all of those things make you sound as if you're unsure, right? It makes you seem like you don't know the answer. So instead of saying, I don't know, let me look into it, or you start off with, it depends, or I don't know, let me check. And so what we need to do here is actually reframe those uncertainties as options or scenarios. And we'll go through that in a few minutes. Three, you flood them with detail. Executives, especially if you were trying to appear more senior, when you give them too much detail, they'll gloss over, they tune out. You'll tell them everything that they need to know, when in reality, you're not telling them a single thing that they need to walk away from. You want them to walk away with the idea that I know exactly what I need to do to solve this problem. And again, we often don't do that. So that makes you come across as a little bit more junior. So here, point three on the other side, selective depth. Think about your audience. I've talked a lot about know your audience, know what they care about, tailor your message to that, but also figure out that person that day. They may like more detail. They may not like more detail. They might want to go through this quickly, but be very clear about what you're trying to do. Four, wait to speak until you're 100% sure. We often jump in and be like, I have an idea or I have a thought. I mean, let people finish their sentences first and then get into it. And if you're not 100% sure, it's okay to say, I don't know, right? So we often jump in trying to show confidence by speaking. Sometimes we don't need to. And so if you're going to speak, make sure you speak early, speak calm, come up with, if you don't know the answer, I don't know, let me get back to you. Kind of make sure that you're constantly the same. This up and down roller coaster of emotion, obviously, again, a trap on the other side. And then finally, point five, this idea that we hide behind the data. We sound, this is what the data says. This is what I think we should do. Really think about, how does that data tie into a business direction? Our job when we meet with them isn't to show them how accurate our data is. It's actually to use that to say that this data ties to this business direction. It helps revenue. It will increase our customer numbers. It'll prevent our churn, right? All of these things when you tie it to their languages. And so that's where the key kind of 5 key traps that we often face when we're going through that. Excuse me. So the frame for impact framework is the kind of the framework we're going to talk about today. So I like to use little fun, catchy analogies. So in this case here, we're trying to create impact, and let's frame it in a way that allows us to do that. And we'll go through each of these steps, but it starts off with F, frame the stakes, reveal the signal, align the story, make a recommendation, and then emphasize the impact, right? And so let's go through each of these. But ideally, the frame is you're able to use that. Either you want to use that in one slide, you want to use that in a Slack message, or you can explain something to somebody in 30 seconds. And if you use this framework, you're going to catch their attention from the start. So the goal isn't to speak more and add more to it, but it's really to make that everything that you say into kind of a sound like leadership or thoughtful in that space. And so for our today's conversation, we'll use a scenario: retention analysis. So the business came to us with a clear problem. We delivered, and now how do we make sure that we communicate this in a senior way, right? With that executive presence that we want to have. And so our problem on the left side, we've had a decline in repeat orders over 2 quarters. Can your team find out what's driving it? So then we start looking at what the context is. We've had a drop in our retention rate. Our mobile customers have seen a big decline. There's this thought in the company that we're having onboarding friction or fatigue of notifications. And so the team does an analysis. 6 weeks, again, it's a made up example. 6 weeks, looking at 3 years of data, we find that our churn model is accurate, our predictors, our segment risk, a drop in returning customer logins after 4 weeks. So potentially after 4 weeks, they start getting tired, and the model is stable. Okay, so obviously these are things that a lot of detail. How do we then turn that into something that the business will care about and will allow us to come across as more senior? And so if we look at that on the left side, I know it's a lot of text, a lot of reading, but on the left side, we go straight into the detail. The model achieved 92% accuracy based on 3 years of data. The features were this. The users that had incomplete showed this. We also saw lower this. Also, we think that there's notification fatigue. We'll continue to validate the model before suggesting next steps. All right, so I went through that very quickly, but ultimately a lot of detail, not much action, not much confidence, a lot of words like possibly, will continue, we think, right? Again, that's based on our analysis. We don't want to, we're typically in data. We try to be objective of the situation. We don't have all the context. On the right side, we're now using that frame model. We are on track to lose 1.8 million in repeat revenue over the next quarter if it continues to decline. Everyone already agrees is the problem. Now you just put a number behind it. Our analysis shows the drop comes from new mobile users where the incomplete onboarding is the key driver. This connects directly to our Q4 retention OKR. If we improve it, we can get an increase in 6-point in retention. I recommend a 2-week pilot to simplify the mobile onboarding to see if this works. If we can do this, then we'll protect about a 1.5 million AR and stabilize growth. Again, you would frame that differently based on the audience, but we're starting off with very much the number. We're framing it in the number, right? So let's go into exactly what that looks like. And you'll have access to these slides. I'm happy to share these with you. I know, again, a lot of text, but when we talk about framing it, we start off with, if this continues at our current rate, the risk is. We really start with like the kind of, you can say shock and awe, but we put a number behind it. Are we talking about something that we should be talking about? We're losing $10,000 a year. Okay, well, why am I here? Why are we talking about this? Why is this meeting even relevant? Versus if we start to talk about bigger numbers or a specific thing, you're going to catch their attention from the start, and you're going to be able to then get them to say, okay, now I'm interested. I'm interested in solving this problem. You've put a number behind it. And so that's what frame is. Frame that opportunity, frame the stakes. When we then go into the next part, which is revealing the signal, this is where we want to surface the single most important driver of why we get there. So earlier, hey, we're losing 1.8 million. Okay, now I got my attention. Now, why are we doing that? Well, because our mobile users who don't complete onboarding are 2.5 times more likely to churn within the first 30 days. Okay, and the onboarding may be 5 steps that we do to make the customer feel like they're using the product. And we've seen a bunch of that in our industry. So here you're using key sentences or phrases like the single biggest driver. What stands out most is the clear pattern. One behavior explains. You're really making it just one thing, this one thing. Now, yeah, there could be 5 or 6 things, but a lot of the times all you need to do is say, let's just action one thing today, one small piece. And so you don't want to give them a list of here's 17 things we need to fix. Start off with the biggest one. And then once we have their attention, then you can say, okay, there are other things we should look at, but you've at least got them. You have to make it contrast based. So another part 2 that we talk about is this is the pattern we're seeing. And this is like compared to, so that they can understand the differences, right? You're making a trade-off. So what's different, surprising, or new? And then use the language in their terms. right? So we're trying to avoid data terms, data terminologies, data language. We're trying to really turn it into what is for them, a feature, an element, a step in the process, something like that, that will really make it actionable for them because they don't understand back end data or, you know, those sorts of elements, but they do understand the process and their onboarding or their sales funnel, or they understand those things, right? The things that they look at on a daily basis. Once you've now you've revealed the signal, we want to align the story because again, I mentioned they need to care about it. So you've told them 1.8 million in revenue. You've told them that it's mobile users. You're now tying it to maybe an OKR or something that they can kind of get to. Connects to our goals. That explains why we're seeing this shift in a KPI. This will help us achieve. You're now aligning it to a story, a narrative that you're trying to create. Because the fact is that, 1.8 million is at risk because our customer onboarding is going down. They might be like, okay, is that a big number? Is that not a big number? Is 1.8 something I should care about? Like a lot of the times you just need to kind of align it to a story. If 1.8 million goes down and we don't address this through mobile users, this is really going to impact our customer acquisition number by the end of the year, which means that our stock price could go down accordingly, or we're not going to hit our quarterly targets because this is a significant gap. So you're kind of tying it back to something that shows that you're not just looking at it from a data perspective, but you understand the business objectives. And it shows how you understand why it matters. And that's the biggest part, right? A lot of the times analysis says do step 1 and 2, skip step 3. But there might be a reason that we're doing step 3 in our funnel, and maybe we don't want to cut that out. And so if you are recommending that we do that to fix this issue, you're also showing them why you understand why it matters for them in that context of the business. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, avoid technical isolation and really think about bridging the data to the decision, the business to the decision, right? So bring them along the journey. The data says the business needs to understand this is the decision. So you're creating that story. Finally, big part that we try to avoid doing also is making a recommendation. We often don't want to. We're afraid to make one, or we're not sure if we should, or maybe we recommend too many things. So again, here, I'm always a big believer that you come across much more senior when you're willing to put something down. I recommend we do this. The next thing that we should look at is this. It might be more investigation into the data. So you may not have a decision yet, but you're at least making a recommendation to do the next step. We'd like to run a small pilot, or hey, we could implement this without significant impact. Proposing a 6-month initiative into something oftentimes also gets the eyes glossing over because everyone knows a 6-month initiative may not work. So here you really can gather trust by proposing a direction and not waiting for them to make the decision. So be specific. Make your asks small. The goal is, like I said, you don't want to go with a big thing, but you can make something that's easy to say yes to. A 2-week pilot on a small segment, and my team can do it without any support from anybody else, and we can come back and prove the value to this group. Why would I say no to that, right? It depends, again, on the context, but there's no reason for me to say no. That seems logical, that if you can run it, let's test it, let's see what happens, let's see if that actually is the problem. Using confident phrasing when you make a recommendation is also really key. I recommend, and we should, not maybe, and we could, or I think we might be able to. That means it raises doubt, right? Yellow flags along the journey raises doubts. And if you say, I think maybe we could, then my first question to you would be, or do you actually believe in this or not? Or I'm walking away going, well, they didn't seem too confident in what they were proposing. Do they really know what the problem is? Even though you do, and you have shown that through your analysis, you just didn't convince them of that. And then finally, end with that decision path. So if you are doing a test or a pilot, what is the go or no go? Can you make that recommendation? So we're going to test this for 2 weeks, and we'll come back to the group with the evaluation, and we'll decide if we should continue or not. And so then they know that 2 weeks from now, and I'll set that up as a meeting or whatever, I'll set it up, and 2 weeks from now, you'll come back to them. So making a recommendation. And then the final part is, again, always finish off with emphasizing the impact again. So you've started off with a problem, you've given them the money, now the impact. So you're not going to solve the $1.8 million problem. You might, but people will still continue not to maybe buy a second time with you, or maybe they'll cancel their contract if they don't onboard properly, regardless of what you do. And so there's a $1.8 million problem, but in reality, we think we can solve 1.2 million with this initiative. Again, there's no magic bullet, one problem, one solution. So I think you always have to be mindful when you come across to say, yeah, we could fix all this. You can't. And so here, as you wrap up your statement, talk about what the impact that you do believe will happen based on the recommendation that you make. I have a $1.8 million problem because mobile users drop off in the conversion funnel. This is the story around that. This is where I recommend we fix that by doing this test on a small market. And I believe we can get 1.3 million back or 1.5 million back, or increase the retention back up to our goal of 85% or 82 or whatever it happens to be, right? So phrases like this could save us, we can recover, this changes us to allow this, the expected payoff is, right? So just again, tying it back, and make sure that it's not in, again, data terms, but in money. People love money. People like percentages. People like time saved or customers retained or headcount reduced or things like that. People love that sort of stuff because that's what they're used to talking about. So make it sure that you tie back. And whatever number you used in the stakes at the start, close the loop with that. And it's just a small sentence. And so that's the frame model. And so when we recap it, right, we talk a lot about it's just a 5-step process, and every company and every problem will be slightly different, but it's something to give you as a framework that you can then start to think about your problem. Can you, with whatever you're presenting, apply this so that it's a clearer flow? Right? We talked, start with the why, reveal the signal, align the story, make a recommendation, and emphasize the impact. And if you use this framework, I bet that you'll notice that you'll become a little bit clearer about what you're trying to get them to do in that moment, which then will get you that confidence. So now you'll be more confident in your message because you prepared for it in advance. That confidence will then help you be more influential because people will be like, wow, he really believes in this. He seems to have done the math. This makes sense. I trust them in order to do this. Let's do it. And then obviously if it works out, then you then grow that influence. So the frame model helps you on both. The last part though is that's easy, right? But we need to say no sometimes. So part of it is what I've just shown now is how do you present something when you've discovered a finding, right? But a lot of the times we don't come across as senior or exec ready because we're often the bottleneck, the roadblock, the guy who says no, the person who says no. Right. And a lot of the times people will come and say, yeah, Pierre says no all the time. He doesn't get the bigger picture here. Right. And we're saying no for not because we want to stop progress or not make it, but we're also mindful of our capacity and our bandwidth and our team's work and whether or not that's realistic or not. So here in this slide here, we talk about saying how to say no like a leader. One of the biggest mistakes that we make is that we always tie it back to bandwidth, capabilities, capacity, lack of data. We always bring it back to something that is our problem. And what I wanted to share here is that we really need to think about this in a way of how do we turn this into showing them trade-offs and decisions that we're making internally. So when someone comes to me and says, Pierre, we've got this really high important project, if I turn around and go, yeah, everyone's really busy right now, I don't have capacity for that, so no, we're not doing that, it comes to them like I haven't actually considered the business use case. But if I frame the same message, I don't have capacity, no time, we've got other projects on the go, slightly differently, like that's a great idea, I understand where you're going at, I'm struggling to do the trade-off between this item and this Q4 retention initiative that we're already working on that's going to generate $2.2 million of additional revenue. Help me understand that, right? And they might go, well, actually ours is only 150K. So you're right. That's probably not as important. Or, wow, I can't justify 2.2 million. So I can't delay that for you or whatever it happens to be. You're giving them a trade-off that most people with common sense will look at it and say, you're right, I can't defend that, because they know that if they force you to deprioritize Q4 retention with a $2.2 million return, you're probably going to escalate that up and say, hey, I'm struggling to understand why we would trade off a $2.2 million project for a $100,000 project. And that's going to get shut down right away. And they're going to look bad because they came with you with a thing. So the way I approach it again is, that's an interesting direction. Let's look at the trade-offs. Or, hey, to deliver this properly, we need to pause this. Should we be doing that? Or, hey, our focus right now is, I don't know, improving our foundation. We're not ready for this yet, but I think we should look at that next quarter. All right, you're giving them a future idea of when to look at that. Let's schedule this for later once we see the impact. Here's what saying yes would mean for our other commitments. Again, trade-offs, decisions, they're transparently seeing the impact of what you're asking versus what you're giving up. Because for every yes that we do say, we are saying no to 5 other things. And so in reality, if I say yes to you, I got to say no to somebody else. Should that make sense? And so finally, I'll just wrap up with this. Anchor your no in a business priority. So obviously tying it back to business projects that you're working on, or initiatives or OKRs. Make sure that you explain to them the trade-offs and show that you've thought about them, because it's easy to just say, no, we're not doing that, or no, we can't do that. But if you show them the trade-offs, it makes you appear more senior, because they're seeing that you're validating their request against other things in the business. No one ever tries to make you angry. I know we get angry when we get 15 requests in and it's like, I got to say no to everybody. But use that composure and context, because when you flip-flop or roller coaster of emotions with stakeholders, that also is a signal that you're not ready yet to handle that balance. For them, maybe you are ready, but for them, they see that as a signal that you're not ready. And then always offer a future time to revisit it, or an alternative. So at the end of the day, you're not saying no, you're saying, I'm trading off against this, or no, I cannot do this today, but I will look into this next quarter if it remains a priority. You're giving them an alternative or a future timeline to look into that. And so with everything else, I've talked a lot here in the last 28 minutes or so. This comes from practice. And so for me, I'd love to challenge you all with a request that comes down your pipeline. The next time you feel like the first reaction is no, start to think about, why you're pushing back on that, and start to think about how you would draft your no using either the frame process or what we just talked about, which is a trade-off conversation of, yes, I understand what you're after, but, or hey, but we have to trade off against this, right? And so start to think about that structure that we just talked about in the last slide. So starting with that appreciation or that alignment, I can see your problem, anchor that in a business priority or trade-off, and then end with the next step of, let's revisit this later. And a strong no, as I mentioned at the bottom, isn't a sign of rejection. It's really just leadership with clarity, especially when you explain the context. And so that's our session today. I think we have time for questions. This all falls under, as I share at the end of every session here, it all falls under this Maven course that this cohort course that I'm running, from data manager to AI ready leader. And so part of what we talk there across 3 big sessions is how to develop an operating system that allows you as a leader to take that step from being a manager to a leader. How do you prioritize effectively? How do you communicate effectively? How do you drive a system that frees you up to think about those strategic initiatives that you may not have had the time into? So for people that are here today, here's a discount code that you can use for this session. So 20% off the course. So you can scan the QR code, it'll take you there. Again, I need to update these dates. The dates will be November 17th, 18th, and 20th, and the 25th. So apologies for that. That's an oversight on my part. But if you scan the QR code, it'll take you there and you'll see the accurate dates. And so with that, I'll open up the floor to any questions we might have. So apologies for talking so much. Questions or thoughts or comments? Anything I can provide more clarity on?
Good evening. Do you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for the presentation. You provide really very good insights. Just top of mind, in the beginning of your of the conversation and the presentation, you said, like, speak speak early when it comes to speaking with confidence. Why is that? Because typically, we tend to believe that leaders speak last and not early in the conversation. Well, just a thought that I want to share here.
Yeah, because a lot of the times if you wait too long, I mean, it's still a very hierarchical meeting. Most companies still have this hierarchy where certain people will speak at certain times, and depending on where how many people are in that meeting, it's easy for you not to get a chance to speak at all. Now, again, in that context, it's possible that you're the one presenting, so you'll be heard. But in other instances, you have an opinion or an insight from your area, and if you don't speak, it'll move on to something else. And then you've lost that opportunity to showcase your seniority in that moment. And so that's where I say that if you have a clear idea, recommendation, understanding of the issue, take advantage of that and speak early in that moment because you can guide where the conversation will go. So that's that message. You're
Okay.
right that a lot of leaders will hang back and listen, especially when you're at a C level. But I think in our case here, we're trying to showcase our maturity, so I recommend speaking a little earlier when you get a chance. Yeah.
Okay. Clear. Yeah. Thank you.
No, if you've got nothing to say, don't say anything because that's even worse. But if you've got something to say, then obviously take advantage of that and get in there early. Yeah.
Any good books and further reading that you advise? About topics that you covered. When you were talking about saying no, I tend to think about the positive no from not Fisher, but the other one, the
Start with
uh,
no.
yeah,
Sound
Starry,
like
no,
yeah.
not Starry no, but a positive no. Yeah, I don't know. But any books or something that you say like this is really interesting for people who want to learn more on a topic?
Yeah, I don't have them all in front of me, but one, I mean, so here, for example, this one here, I really recommend building a story brand. I know it's a more about like Donald Miller talks a lot about like this idea of building your own brand and things, but there's a lot of good tips in here about how do you create a story that people resonate with. And so for a storytelling perspective, or even just getting people to become champions of yours, this is a really good one. So it helps you create that story. The other one that I also love, this is more a product management book. It's called Aligned with O'Reilly. So this is, I mean, if you think about data, we're really building products in data. And so this one here talks about getting influence within an organization, building rapport with stakeholders. Being a big part of this is no one takes you seriously until you have trust with them anyways, right? So there's an element here where it's a really good book on how to get people aligned on your initiatives, how to get people to understand your side of things, how to kind of tie it all together when there's politics and ego at play. Because we all know that no matter what you propose, there's always going to have someone that has a counter objective to you. And so how do you navigate that? So
Mm-hmm.
those two I find have been really big shifters in my thinking in the last probably year and a half or so.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, and I found back the name that I in mind is The Power of a Positive No from
Okay.
William Ury. Very strong book. I read it in
Oh, okay.
it's the one who was co-author of Getting to Yes, if you know
Oh, yeah, yeah,
the
getting to
negotiation
yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah.
And there's a sequel, but he wrote it himself. So The Power of a Positive No. I read it in the past. Very strong.
Okay. I mean, I'll look into that. I haven't seen that. I've read Getting to Yes, but I haven't the other one. So that's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Welcome.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you all for joining then. I will wrap up. I'll stop the recording and then